Burgess here with Music Marketing TV, and today I'm going to show you how to make this Pluck sound with Repro 5. Here's a quick example of it in action. So there are several layers to this sound. The very first thing we're going to do is we're going to turn off the send, and then on the pluck we're going to bypass all the effects. So altogether it sounds like this with all the effects and extra stuff in the mixer turned off. So to make this sound inside of Repro 1 is going to be what's required of us in order to get it to its final state. So it's actually a pretty simple sound to make out the gate. So the main thing that you have to do is you just have to get the right oscillators going. So in this case, they're both square waves. And if you go into the tweaks panel, I chose the P5 old and bottom. And if you change these, it can change the sound drastically. Have we changed from bottom into something else? So these are the ones I settled on, and the way that the pluck is being generated is on the synth panel. We could see in the filter, there is a low pass that's being clamped down really hard. The envelope has 100% depth, and on the envelope, we've got a reasonably fast attack, and the decay is what's been dialed in. So the sustain is at 0, so it's determined by however fast this decays. If I have a long decay, So the decay setting is going to be a very important one. Those are the main settings you have to get right. I also have oscillator A a tad louder than oscillator B, and the sync function is on. The sync function isn't very important in this patch, but just to show you with it off, they don't sync up. So throughout the playing of the sound, there'll be subtle phase changes, and because of the processing I'm doing down the line, this wound up not really mattering that much. But you can hear all that phasing as it comes in and out. Sync will solve this so that whenever oscillator A starts, oscillator B is also going to start. And you get a way more consistent sound. Now, as I said, sometimes processing afterwards sort of makes this not matter as much. But if you're going to stop at this point, that's going to be really important. So if you've got that, you've got the base of the sound. The filter panel has a bunch of different filters. If you open up the tweaks page, I'm using crispy. Some of these sound incredibly different, and dialing in different envelope settings can really give you a variety of choices to pick from. So that's rounded, driven, poly. Poly's really aggressive. So I used crispy for this one. I really like the sound that it brought to the table, and it gave me the envelope, and everything just sort of jived the way I wanted it to. So after that, we go into our effects. So there's a bunch of effects on. The only one that's not on is the delay. If we go ahead and turn all these off, it sounds like this. So to start us off, we've got the velvet, and all I did with this was I turned up the input gain and just sort of drove it into the roof. Now they have a variety of settings. The other one that I thought sounded really good was the tube breaker. But adding this to the chain, this is what it sounds like. So it's just adding some distortion a bit. And then if we do tube breaker, tube breaker's got a more mellow tone. And after writing more of the track, I decided I wanted a brighter tone, and I actually came back and changed it to bright. Up next, we have the sonic conditioner, which really isn't doing that much. It's mostly here as an afterthought now. Originally, I was using it to balance the gain change I was doing with the velvet, and it just wound up being left on. So now I leave it on as a part of the creative process. Didn't use a delay. I knew I didn't want one of those right away. And then we have the Reso Q. So this is just an EQ that I've dialed into place and gave it a little bit of a nice mid boost and brought up the highs a bit and dipped the lows a little bit. And, you know, select your given frequencies. Set all by ear. There's no visualizers or anything, which is almost a good thing because forces you to listen to what you're doing. And then we also have drench. Now drench has some very interesting possibilities here. So drench has the pre-delay, and the pre-delay is super interesting. Also, tone is great too. But if you dial the pre-delay up, and I think it was like 198 for what I was doing, you can get this really cool rhythmic effect. And you know, maybe not 198, but you move it around to hit just in that pocket, and you can have some really cool rhythms going. I wound up settling for no pre-delay later on down the line because I opted to use a verb send instead. But I really like what drench is bringing to the table, and it's important for this particular sound that it have some reverb on it already, because we're going to do some pitch shifting as we go through our chain here. The tone's also been brought down. This is another one that just sort of was a result of mixing. Originally it was brighter, decided to dial it back. We go over here. It was just a little too bright for what I wanted. This was just about perfect where it was. And that is the patch itself. Moving on from the patch, we go through the signal chain now. So let's go ahead and turn all the effects on, and we'll look at these one at a time. There's also some noise that's brought up just through the processing, which doesn't really matter when we're playing it. But the very first thing I do is I just cut all the low end and boost right around where the main fundamentals are happening, so that this one note is really just driven a little bit harder than everything else. So that's going on there. Next up, we hit an OTT, which is just some multiband compression. And that's, I'm going to leave it at that, but essentially I'm just crushing the sound really hard. And that's why the reverb was important to have on it, because you get that kind of an effect when you have reverb before you hit your compressor. Up next, we have a transient shaper. This is just adding some attack and also giving us a little bit of a dip on the decay. Really just tightening the sound up. Then we have a pitch shifter, which is actually pitching it up an octave. So the pitch shifter is a really cool effect. You don't have to use this particular one. You could just sort of grab whatever pitch shifter you want. And then after that, we have another Pro Q3. This one is, again, just doing another cut because I introduced some stuff from the earlier processes. And I just wanted it, you know, sparkling clean. I wanted absolutely zero stuff down there. So after this process, we go into a verb send, which is going out in parallel. And I've got a reverb that's got a 100% mix on it, and I've dialed it in to be a pretty short reverb. And this is creating a lovely effect. That is what it's adding to the table. So you get a lot more air, and I automate it up and down. So you notice it goes away and it comes in and out according to what I thought sounded cool. So right there, it's coming up. It was actually high right there, but because I play lower notes, it doesn't sound like it's there as much. It's kind of an interesting effect. So really a nifty thing. And then I also use a transient shaper similar to the previous one in order to just dial it into place. And when you put all these things together, that is what you get. If you have any questions about this, let me know. Subscribe and hit that bell icon for future videos. And have a blessed day.